Our speaker today is Burke Files. Burke's expertise in asset recovery, due diligence, anti-money laundering and intellectual property matters has made him a highly sought-out international speaker. As the head of an international investigative firm, he has traveled all over the world investigating cases and successfully restoring assets from a few $100,000 to over $20 billion. Burke is the author of 5 books and the winner of 2 book awards.
Quick overview on my background. I've spent 40 plus years in finance, 30 plus as a financial fraud investigator. Run cases in 135 countries and been very lucky to visit 110. When you have an asset, you want to make sure that it won't expire. For example, an asset that would expire on you would be a grain or a root or a tuber. Those things expire. Animals die, but something that has some element of perpetuity to it became a currency, and that currency was often a gold or silver or copper or things of that nature, such as the Yap Island Fae. But we won't go back that far. We're going to gold. So, gold gods and rulers. If you take a look at the history of our gods, how did we decorate their effigies? They were either solid gold or with gold leaf over them. And what did rulers want? Rulers wanted gold. This goes back to really primary reason behind the conquest of the New World, was looking for religious freedom. And by the way, there happened to be exploitation rights split between Portugal and Spain, south of here, to look for gold. And they found a lot. North America and Latin America is incredibly minerally rich. So, where do we see gold today? Really, the 1 kilogram gold bar is the standard for exchanging gold. They're all hallmarked. You'll see if my mouse is doing this, it's a Swiss 1 kilo fine gold, 999.9. There's the hallmark, and there is the serial number, utterly unique. So is gold traceable? In this form, it's very traceable. These 1 kilogram gold bars are stored often in what are called gold banks, banks that accept gold as a deposit. We try to put in cash or currency into our bank. These particular banks take gold. I worked for 2 different gold banks over the years in Switzerland, and their means of acquiring gold was brilliant. Their means of accepting gold was brilliant. They had one of the largest networks of gold dealers, miners, and middlemen associated that I've ever seen before since. It's a shame when the principal of the company passed away, his children fought over the bank until there was nothing left. So, what does this look like? Why is gold so alluring? Well, quite frankly, gold is one of the few things that's held itself against inflation throughout history. If you look back a few thousand years, or even a few hundred years, 1 ounce of gold bought you a very fine suit. And even today, 1 ounce of gold will buy you a very fine suit. Not so much true for Argentinian pesos or Zimbabwe dollars. I've got 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars in my drawer. I don't think I can get a cup of coffee with it. So, what does a 1 kilogram gold bar look like? It's about the size of a phone. It's about the size of a phone, and that phone, it's nice to see a phone like this weigh almost 2.5 pounds, 2.2 pounds. It's also a very concentrated store of value. If you're moving money, the last thing you want to do is smuggling single dollar bills. Why? Because you have a problem of bulk. Any item of U.S. currency between $1 to $100 bill weighs 1 gram, brand new. Is 66.3 millimeters wide, 156 millimeters long, and 0.11 millimeters thick. So, what are you going to do to get $65,000? How much is that going to weigh? 6.5 kilos. Yeah. And it's going to be a lot bigger than a bar of gold. It also has a great deal of bulk. I testified ever so briefly in a case in Kenya about someone passing $40 million in a briefcase from one car to another. It doesn't fit in a briefcase. And $40 million in $100 bills is a lot of weight. If you looked at these two guys that were passing and receiving the briefcase, the briefcase would have had to have been 4 times larger. And these two, the largest thing that these guys had picked up in a long time was a sandwich and a cocktail. They couldn't lift the weight. So it just went to prove that that story was BS. So there is a value even today in wealth in gold. It has to do with the fact that it can be shape changed to move it beyond national boundaries. It has a dense value if you're looking for to keep your money in a much more compact form. It's very good at that. It's also universal. You can use gold in any country. If you need to redeem gold for currency in any country, you can do that, often anonymously. I know there are rules and laws against that, but there are rules and laws against speeding. It happens. It's easy. So what were the first ways that gold was smuggled? Aqua regia and gold chloride. If you were going from Milan to Paris with some gold, what was the likelihood that you would 300 or 400 years ago make it from Milan to Paris without a bump on your head and you be gone the gold? The answer is not good. Not good at all. And in fact, that was part of the birth of a letter of credit. When the Templar Knights came on the scene, you could visit a Templar castle or a property and receive a letter of credit. You could deposit your gold or silver with them in Milan, and they would give you a stamped and sealed letter of credit that could be redeemed at a Templar organization anywhere there was a Templar organization, whether it be the Levant or whether it be up in the UK. They would then check the seal against their library of seals, hence the seal of authenticity, to figure out whether that was a good letter of credit from one of their organizations. And the trade fairs that they used to have around Europe were an absolute necessity because it was at those trade fairs that they would exchange copies of their seals, that they would exchange the letters of credit, they would credit and debit their books, and they would have that opportunity to reset everything, to get money due, to pay money owed, and then they'd go back to their location. Those credit fairs were absolutely necessary. So some type of transmutation of that gold into another form was invented. Aqua regia is a fascinating and nasty little chemical composition of, I may get it wrong, I've been a long time since I played with chemistry, of hydrochloric acid and nitric acid. And it dissolves the gold and it creates this beautiful orange-hued solution. And then you also have gold chloride. Gold chloride is just that. It's a salt of gold. Now, does that look valuable to you? Not really. So let me pull the mics off, the mute off. How would you use these to smuggle gold?
Yeah, Judy, I think it would be good if we could take the audience off mute.
There we go.
There we go. I'm going to start asking to unmute
Sure.
people if they want to come off mute.
So how would you use aqua regia or gold chloride to smuggle gold?
Wine bottles.
I love that example.
Mhm.
Got to make sure you have a screw top and not the cork top. Otherwise, the aqua regia will eat through the cork. How else?
For the powder, line something with it.
Oh, you can do better than that. What would you do with the powder that looked like that, like yellow? What does it look like to you?
Spice.
Yeah,
Paint.
both. You could bottle it as bulk turmeric. It'd be a little heavy for turmeric. Or you could blend it with a solvent base and have it as a yellow-based paint. Another is it's very close to a particular color of sodium cyanide that's used in bug sprays and other stuff, and that you could say it's a cyanide derivative and put it into a solution in the pallets of liquids that come through. You could put it, dissolve it into water and make it Gatorade. And of course, I offered this question to a bunch of young folks, and they said, "Why don't you just mix it with water and call it urine? No one will open the sample bottles." Yeah, good point. Good point. So there's a variety of ways to change the shape of gold, and we'll call it chemically. One of the most amazing ways to change the shape of gold is an amalgam. Have any of you ever seen what mercury does to gold?
Mm-mm.
It's worthwhile looking up online mercury and gold coming together. First time I saw this was probably 30 years ago in the deserts north of Phoenix. A good friend Tim was a gold miner. He was a railroad worker that retired, and he needed a hobby, so his wife sent him out and said, "Why don't you become a gold miner?" And he said, "Okay." And what he would do, and he became a very good chemist, is he would pan the gold down to the fines, and then he would put some mercury in the pan. And the mercury will literally eat the gold. It looks like it's eating it, chomping on it, like a little amoeba eating its environment. And then here you see a ball of mercury that now on the right has eaten a bunch of gold, and it's called an amalgam. That amalgam is a way of recovering gold that's used throughout the world. It's banned in the United States, but throughout the world, all you have to do to get the gold is to heat the mercury and vaporize the mercury. Now, could that possibly have some environmental and health consequences? Oh, yeah. You. I gave, yeah, I gave this presentation, and I'm forgetting her name. This is terrible. She was a federal prosecutor up in Alaska as well, and prior to that, an officer. And there was a rumor that this particular town had some illegal gold mining on. It was a particularly cold evening. She drove into town and she looked around, and there was one roof that was all silvery. They had been cooking off the mercury in their fireplace. The mercury fumes went up, but settled out and precipitated out on the roof because it was so cold. She says nothing like busting an illegal miner and also having a hazmat site. But it is incredible how effective the mercury is at eating the gold and becoming an amalgam. And what does that look like to you? That could be a piece of waste metal.
Would it be dangerous to hold like that? Because mercury is really poisonous.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm with you. I said, yeah, I used to play with it and still have a jar of it in my garage, but I wouldn't put it in my hand. That was long ago in the 70s. So when we mine gold typically comes in nuggets or flakes.
Mhm.
What's fascinating in the gold mining is that those nuggets were probably larger and inside a quartz formation somewhere up in the mountain, and the quartz eroded and it tumbled down. That's why it has that smooth look to it. These other nuggets that are a little rougher probably did not tumble down. In fact, what happens is the water that comes down to the streams and across the gold seams is often slightly acidic, just acidic enough to begin dissolving the gold. And those acids come particularly from decaying leaves, tannins, and the like. But as you get further downstream, you'll find in the stream dead bugs or dead fish or decaying flesh. And what happens is that begins to rot. It puts off ammonia, which will then neutralize the water, and the gold will precipitate out around that dying bug or that fish scale or something. If you look at these flakes, they often resemble what they precipitated out on. So we have the flakes, which are typically placer mines, or is digging into those veins of quartz and the rest to recover the gold, sometimes powdering the ore to float it, sometimes treating it with acid to leach the gold out. And then you come up with what's called a dory bar. A dory bar is a nondescript metallic amalgam, typically of gold, silver, platinum, copper, several other the metallic elements that occur together. And these are usually about 80% gold. It could be more, it could be less. It all depends upon the mine. Now, this is what the gold bank would buy. They had representatives spread out across the globe, and they would go and they would buy the dory bars from the mining operations. And they would pay about 60 cents on the dollar for the gold. And the rest of the minerals, were just part of their profit. And they would have someone wait with the miners until they were paid. Why is this the big deal? Because most of the other buyers would only pay 40 or 50 cents on the dollar for the gold. And the miners would have to wait 30 days to get paid. What I did is I worked with a madman who was one of their buyers, and I made sure that as soon as the gold was picked up and shipped to the refinery, that we got the assay report. We shared the assay report with the miners. Back then it was fax, and I wired the funds at the exact same time. They were paid within a few days. It's a funny thing about being authentic and and doing what you're supposed to do, as opposed to shilly-shallying around, if you will. But that's what this gold bank did. But along the way, I learned a lot about how the miners themselves got around the export controls of gold. Because in a lot of the gold mining countries, especially in Africa and Latin America, there's a tariff, or the country is the only body allowed to buy the gold. So, a miner can be pretty creative when he's cornered. And these are a couple of things that I saw over a period of time, transmogrification. The first is they would turn the gold into what they would call brass rod. On the left, you see true brass rod, but that's what they would cast. They would cast and they would machine brass rod. It's Dory gold, so it's a lot heavier than brass, but they would package and they would ship it to a free trade zone that had a refinery in it. And there are several of those refineries that exist in Dubai, Kampala, Uganda, right by the airport. I'm sorry, outside of Kampala, Uganda, by the airport in Entebbe. And they would enter the free trade zone as brass rod. They would never leave again. They would, however, be refined, and a credit to their bank account, wherever that may be, would have occurred from the free trade zone to their bank account. It's a beautiful way to do it. Sometimes they would make something simple. This is a drawer pull. I saw an enormous briefcase handle that was Dory gold. Lots of different ways to get it out. Now, the smartest is this little thingy here. This isn't the exact duplicate. If I could remember the bracket, I'd buy one. It was a bracket off of a Hyundai pickup truck. And what the buyer did in outside of Accra, Ghana, is he had a die made that would make this bracket with his stamping machine. And he would cast gold in an ingot that was favorable in shape to the stamping die, and then he'd put the ingot in there and it'd stamp out a bracket, a Dory gold bracket. And then he would spray paint it with aluminum paint and then paint over it with OEM black. And there you have a big hunk of gold that was packaged up as a Hyundai bracket. And he would ship them as Hyundai brackets. I hope he's still doing it today. He was a very wonderful host. And he would ship them as Hyundai brackets. So I said, why do you paint him with the silver first? He said they could become scratched. The last thing you want to do is have it scratched and it look like gold or brass. Then they're going to get curious. But if they scratch it and it's silver underneath, they won't care. I said, boy, you've thought a lot about this. You have thought a lot about this. And again, Ghana is one of those countries where the gold has to be assayed and taxed before it's exported. I love this. Look at the shape of the ingots on the right. Come on. Who pours them into heart ingots, for goodness sakes? Then they write on them the weight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, come on. You just look at that. You want to, that little dope slap where it comes across the back of the head and the hair comes up. Well, I used to have hair, but it would have come up. I got the dope slap. Those were irregular ingots of very pure gold that were in the nose cone of that aircraft. Now, the story behind this aircraft, and you can look this up, was it flew from Venezuela to Cayman, and then from Cayman to Miami. And that the idea was, in refueling in Miami, that they were going on to London, and something tweaked the curiosity of a Canadian border control person, Customs and Border. Said that, that nose cone didn't look like it was quite on right. So they went and they unscrewed the nose cone and found all of this. So not only did they lose the gold, they lost the airplane. Forfeitures. So Venezuela and Peru are both substantial gold producing countries that have a lot of I believe the politically correct term is artisanal miners that are looking to get their gold out of the country. These are some of the things that have been found in India. They're pretty creative. I got to give them a C minus though on the top two. Come on, you've got ingots within sandals. Put that through a X-ray machine, and it looks pretty bad. Looks pretty bad. Now, I liked a little bit better. The bottom part is they were arch supports. Gold and clay arch supports. And these were even better, and much more clever. Is you have a variety of different minerals mixed in with the gold chloride. And there you have the gold chloride that's mixed in with clay, or it's mixed in with some, I don't know what the green stuff was. It looks like it's something that's gone off. But it's been mixed in with other minerals to be something else. And you look at the ways of creatively transfiguring gold to smuggle it. And you have to remember, in all this effort you put into hiding the gold and getting it out, how much more does it cost you to reconstitute that mineral or that aqua regia or this clay back into pure gold, saleable gold? So there is an economic trade-off here between creativity, effort, and recovery. It's not a zero-sum game. There is a trade-off. Many years ago, I wrote an article for the Aegis Journal after several folks I know had discovered counterfeit gold bars. And I talked to a couple of the scientists that were trying to figure out what was going on. And they said it's very simple, is they're putting other stuff in there that's got about the same density as gold. They said it's mostly tungsten and lead. And if you look there at a cubic meter weight, kilograms per cubic meter, take a look at gold. 19,320 kilograms per cubic meter, which is almost identical to an alloy of tungsten and lead. So how do you make them? Well, this is what they were finding. They were finding a slug. Sorry, we'll go from the far right. A slug of tungsten with gold foil over it. Thick gold wrap. Here is another slug that's been peeled back. Here you have tungsten bars that have been put into the ingot of gold while it was liquid, when it was being cast. And more of this has been coming up. And the problem we have is that to test for tungsten in an ingot, it used to be you have to do destructive testing, and what you're seeing is 3 different elements of destructive testing. If you're right, well, by golly, by gum, you're the smartest guy on the block, and you've just saved yourself a fortune. But if you're wrong, you've just destroyed a hallmarked bar. That is 99 gold. There's a serial number. And now it's worth what? Oh, it's scrap gold now. You've gone from a hallmark bar to scrap gold, which is a 40% reduction in value. The way they're testing for these is now using an ultrasound device that is almost identical to the ultrasound devices used in checking for steel and what do you call it? Checking for the quality of welds and steel. And now you can do non-destructive testing with an ingot, and it comes up just as clear as a day. So we talked a little bit earlier about gold going to a free trade zone. A free trade zone is a special geographic zone, almost all of the time, that has a different set of rules and laws than the host country does. The last time I looked, there were a little over 10,000 free trade zones around the world. Some of the largest in the United States and in Latin America, followed by Dubai and China. And what this allows you to do, let's say it's a free trade zone for surgery or medicine. You don't have to abide by the same rules or laws of capital formation that the country may have. They give you a more freer hand to do what you want to do. The free trade zone in Colón, Panama, on the north side, is one of the large assembly places for cell phones. Parts come from all over the world, come into the free trade zone, no import duty. The labor is applied to assemble those phones there and then export them, mostly to the United States, but to other Latin American countries. What does the country get out of that? Well, it gets jobs. It gets jobs in their country. Second, it gets the jobs that are tied to all of the support that goes into supporting a free trade zone. And those people leave the free trade zone and spend their money in the community. So here we have on the left, we have is a Degussa refinery, and they're casting 1 kilogram bars. And after they've been cast, they will be weighed, they will be stamped, and they will get a serial number. And here we are at the top, a little bit further along the way. What you see underneath that hand and that pan are pure gold nuggets. And there is a refined, hallmarked 1 kilogram bar in the hand of the person in the photo. And here, what you see below that are bags and bags of Dory gold. You've got little bars, you've got nuggets. That's how it arrives. And it gets refined, and it goes from this brass color to this rich, much richer yellow color. And they stamp it into bars. So why do you smuggle gold? Well, it's a way to get your wealth out of a country, quite frankly. India has some of the most accomplished gold smugglers because Indians put their value and faith in the future in gold. A lot of it they wear in 22 and 24 karat gold jewelry. You know, their savings is they'll buy a nice big hefty bangle. Because the rupee, they don't trust the rupee. Plus the rupee is not convertible. They can't take the rupee and send it to Britain to buy anything. Doesn't work. But you can with gold. So what's another thing you have to do after you've been smuggling? You got to keep it quiet. I always like that picture. I have no idea what it's from, but I like it. You sit down at a table and you always have the conversation. Well, what do you do? I smuggle gold. Oh, really? What do you do? I always like the I forget who it was, probably out of a movie. I think it was Ghostbusters. They asked one of the Ghostbusters, "What do you do?" He said, "I collect reeds, sedges, and mosses." The only conversation ender that I thought was better than that, um, old Mary Duran, an investigator I worked with for many years, she said, "I sell wholesale funerary supplies." She said she's never had everyone talk to her after that. But you got to keep it quiet, and you've got to have an organization in place that the right arm doesn't know what the left arm is doing. One of the most wonderful smugglers I knew before she was a smuggler was, her name was Barbara, and her and her husband had made a lot of money in the fast food franchise business. She hated her husband, then decided to go out on her own. That didn't go the way she thought, because everyone thought he had the brains, not her. He had the brains, but mostly they were pickled. It's the truth. So she decided she'd begin smuggling gemstones. And I had bumped into her a couple of times later in my life and hers. She had a beautiful leather jacket, a suede jacket, that was bedazzled. It had all the little rhinestones on it, and they were rhinestones in her jacket when she left the country. They weren't rhinestones in her jacket when she came back. The second was she would have a whole bunch of clutch purses. This is a wallet. I don't have a clutch purse, but you get the idea. It's bigger. And the entire clutch purses would be covered in jewelry stones. She said they were a rhinestone. She said they're very expensive stones, you know, a Swarovski stone or whatever else. She would declare them, pay a duty on them, and walk right out. Yes, it's a gemstone. Yes, I owe duty. Here you go. Did not tell you that these were green, emerald cut sapphires at $1.25 a piece, worth about $1 million on one clutch purse. I said, "You get nervous?" She said, "No, I just put them in my carry-on and put them above my head. I don't drink while I'm on the plane, stay awake the whole time, come out, roll aboard, declare them at customs. I've got an account with them. I pay them. They say thank you, and off I go." It was very similar to a couple of the gold smugglers over the years. That gold briefcase handle. Every time one of my guys went to Amsterdam and back here, the handle he had here was leather. When he came back from Amsterdam, it was gold. Or a gentleman who drove a truck across the Turkish-Greek border. I'm sorry, Turkish-Bulgarian border on a regular basis. He had a large serpent bracelet. When he went into Turkey, it was brass. When he came back from Turkey, it was gold. He got caught. Someone ratted him out, and they picked him up. And he never said how many trips he made. It was part of the defense process. But he was making 4 and 5 trips a day. And it was about a 2.5 ounce wrist thingy, bracelet. But you got to keep it quiet. You don't let the rest of the world to know what you're doing. I've seen gold made into brackets, briefcase handles, rod. That's a dory gold into rods. I've seen it stamped, dory gold stamped into plates, being exported as brass plates. I've not encountered any of the gold chloride or aqua regia, but I've seen some of that mixed into the clays and minerals. So, you got to wonder, how does some guy get into this? This was a case down in Honduras. A gentleman had claimed he had fallen off a ladder and that the 1-foot fall had caused spinal compression, problems in his shoulders and everything else. And before he was in in Chicago, he was in Honduras. And he said, he had been treated at a hospital in outside of San Pedro Sul. So I said, okay, this is interesting. We got to figure out whether he's telling the truth or not. And he said that he had been treated for a broken clavicle when in San Pedro Sul. Well, we get there. This unassuming gentleman to my left is Dr. Juan. Dr. Juan is a trauma surgeon originally from Peru, now here in the United States. And I said, hey, you want to go? And he goes, why not? We found very quickly that he was never a patient at the hospital. He gave a date that was fortuitous. It was a few months before Hurricane Mitch. And while all the hospital records were destroyed in the basement, the census, the list of the name of everyone who had entered the hospital, had not been destroyed. He had never been there. We then checked to see if he worked in the offshore financial center, the free trade zone, for the garment free trade zone, and went over there, and the security guy came back after a half hour. He said, no, Mr. Files, he's never worked here. I said, you mean at Fruit of the Loom? He said, sir, I've checked all 40 companies going back to 1972. He's never worked here. So in one day we solved the case. So we decided to go off to Copan and then go to a macaw rescue facility. And this would probably be at the macaw rescue facility. Hey, Juan, you want to pose with the birds? He goes, I don't think it's a wise idea. Let's go pose with the birds. Burke, I don't like birds. Let's go pose with the birds. Okay. Peer pressure. Now, this is quite a long time ago. I had worked ever so briefly on the French feeder fund of the Madoff case. And this is what you call dumb luck. I had worked with the attorney, and after about 6 hours, I said, hey, listen, the offering document says no more than 10% will be invested with any manager or in any asset class to avoid a concentration of risk. Makes sense, right? Okay. Well, 98 and then 96% of the money had been invested with Madoff, and the auditor hadn't caught it, Ernst & Young. So who ended up paying for the French feeder fund for Madoff? It was Ernst & Young. It took 4 years of litigation. So about 2 weeks later, I am teaching in Monaco. This is the harbor in Monaco. And it's got to be 12 years ago, 11, 12 years ago. I was going to do later that year the Camino de Santiago, ride a bicycle across Spain. So I was working very hard every morning to do my morning walks, as I called them, stumbles. And as I was coming back, I looked at this boat and I thought, it can't be. So I got up into the room and my wife said, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, I'm looking at the asset registry for Madoff. That's Madoff's boat. They've been looking for it. I called the attorney. I said, Martin, I found Madoff's boat. It's got to be 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning back in the BVI. He goes, we didn't hire you to find it. Do you want the boat or not? He said, well, we heard it's in Monaco. I said, no, it's in a harbor that's half in Monaco, half in France, and it's in the French side. It is? Yeah, have the receiver call me. The receiver called me. I told him where it was. That morning, I was giving a presentation on multinational asset recovery. I happen to work this picture into that presentation. It's a stupid postcard photo. Also, I have a chance to push things a little further. I run cases in 136 countries and have visited 110. This is working in Nigeria. I was working on a case having to do with a very wealthy man tied to a Dana aircraft accident and also teaching there. And this was my guard. He had more fun. I had more fun with him. He was a good guard. He was a member of the police force. And his name, of course, he always thought it was funny that a black guy by the name of Livingston was guarding a white guy. I've used him many more times, a good fellow. This gentleman here, sitting with me, has recently passed away, but that's James Short. He's the head of the International Bodyguard Association. This is the Kenya Club. I just worked on a couple of presentations on security and fraud and due diligence and anti-money laundering. They kept me really busy while in Kenya. And they needed someone to train private security because the police were no longer going to be able to do what I could do in Nigeria, and that's have a police escort for VIPs. So I reached out to my friend, James Short, and I said, well, this fellow over here, Nkonga, needs someone to train his security guards to do a close protection. I said, where are you? He said, I'm in Kenya. I said, so am I. Where are you? He goes, I'm in Nairobi. I said, so am I. Where are you? He said, I'm at the Nairobi Club. I said, I'm 1 or 2 clicks away. He goes, beers tonight. And what happened at this little goofy gathering is he brought into the table some of the top talent in all of East Africa to meet with my client. And my client is just staring at me. He said, how do you know this guy? This guy over here is an Indian security of Indian origin, but a Kenyan security force officer that helped rescue the hostages at the shopping mall when they were taken hostage. It's a little lucky. That's an idiot on the left talking about multinational crime and insurance fraud throughout the Mediterranean. This is for the Hellenic Insurance Group. And this is me after working a job in Switzerland, hiking up to the platform in Interlaken, and everyone wanting to talk to me in German because there I am with a shirt, a sweater, a jacket, and I'm wearing shorts. Last slide here. That's the one who's put up with me for many years, Miss Laura. And as my friend Gatonga in Kenya said, you want to go feed the giraffes? Oh, okay. I thought he was kidding. So I got to feed that giraffe. And then just off to my right over here, one of the wardens is feeding the giraffe and strokes the giraffe's muzzle. Well, I do the same thing. Giraffe frickin' bit me. Had the bite, and then she looks over at me. She says, that one doesn't like to be stroked. Thank you. But there was a recovery. My dear friend suggested to a bunch of Canadian tourists that these giraffes' tongue was so nimble and so delicate that it could collect an alfalfa pellet. If you held it between your teeth, you could just nip it out. I then noticed the game warden doing this. And he looked at me, he says, isn't that true, Mr. Files? Yes, it is. So these group of Canadians gave me their phone and said, can you film this? Absolutely. I think that giraffe stuck that purple tongue about halfway down that poor fellow's throat. So if we're looking at smuggling, it's a well-known and shiny item that people like to see. Coming in with a bar of gold. Well, people will want to know what that is. That'll come right up on your checked luggage as something very thick, and they'll open it up and want to see it. So how do you change that? Well, even if you mix the gold with clay and other items, it's still going to have that incredible density, and they're going to open up and want to look at it. Do you just throw it across the border? Use a drone and fly it across? Actually, right now, that's probably not a bad idea. 5 years ago, not so much so. But now the weight and ability, the power and the ability of the drones to carry weight is substantially increased. And it's been a while since I've been down to the Arizona, Mexico border, a couple of years. But even back then, you could hear the drones going overhead.
Mm.
You know, I'll assume they're taking cash and drugs at that point. But now, you know, being able to carry 3-4 pounds, you know, that's a 1 kilogram bar. It's 2.2 pounds. And you can do that back and forth all day long. There was a book on laundering with gold by a Mark Pleath. It was a terrible book. Don't buy it. He worked for some of the alphabet agencies in Europe and discovered that a few years ago that, oh my God, they can use gold to launder money. It's like, oh my Lord, where have you been? The most effective way I've seen to move gold and launder money using gold is to turn it into something familiar and innocuous. The handle on a briefcase, okay, a little bit pushy, but it works. I particularly like the car bracket. Your investment is maybe $5,000 in equipment and dies, maybe 7, and you make that in your first week. So if you're gonna, you know, if you're looking to smuggle something, it has to be in a way that form is changed substantially, so that someone looking isn't going to look for it. They're not looking for an extra heavy bracket. And this has been seen with a lot of drugs. Many times cocaine is shipped in its concentrated form, dry, packaged, and wrapped in all sorts of paper and tape and coffee and all sorts of things to throw the scent animals off, which doesn't work. Recently, they found cocaine in shipments of alcohol, methanol, coming up from Mexico, in completely dissolved in 5-gallon plastic buckets of methanol. And the recovery from that is actually fairly easy. All you have to do is heat the methanol up to its boiling point, which is quite a bit below that of water. You can then use a condenser, condense the methanol, and what do you have left in the can? A can or the plastic bucket is is your cocaine. Why is this better for cocaine than gold? It's because it's a bigger profit margin in cocaine. About 60% of the profit in cocaine is made between the regional and the street dealer, not the grower or the smuggler, though they do make a lot. So, you know, economics plays a role in smuggling. You have to have a method whereby when you hide something or do the transmogrification and then you reconstitute it, that it doesn't cost more than what you're going to make. Same thing with cocaine, that hiding it or masking it and then recovering it can't cost more than you're going to make. It's more effective in cocaine because the margin's bigger. It's less effective in gold because the margin is smaller. And in smuggling, you've got to have an operation that has many small streams. Large streams get caught. There was an operation out of Los Angeles called La Mina, the mine. And it was fascinating. It was a bunch of Armenian jewelers that bought and sold scrap. They were approached by some Colombians that said, "Hey, brothers, we know that you're not so honest on your scrap and buying and selling. You're mixing other stuff in, like buying stolen jewelry and the rest. Maybe you could work out a deal to move some money using your gold." They thought to themselves, "Why not?" What they did is they made might be off. I'll say 4 or 5 fake 100-ounce gold bars. And they ship the 100-ounce gold bars to Uruguay as paperweights, as a novelty item. Then they'd wire money to Uruguay, and 100-kilo bar of gold would come up from Uruguay that would offset the wire they sent to Uruguay. Simple. They were creating a fake gold bar that they were buying for real money, and they were keeping 7 to 10% of the transaction, and the Colombians were getting the money in Uruguay. They thought this was great. They did it again and again and again and again. There was only one problem. It seems that the United States, as well as many other countries, monitor imports and exports. And they look for transactions that, well, fall outside the bell curve, such as paying $140 a pound for licorice in Pakistan. It's only $1.42 a pound. That was one. But this one was so substantial that the international trade statistics show that Uruguay became a major gold exporter overnight, and it didn't have a single gold mine in the country. Further, that the mining operation was on the 7th floor of an apartment building. Oh, that went poorly for them. But they created a huge river where they were shipping gold bars back and forth constantly, and it showed up on the radar screen. It is better to create many rivulets as opposed to one large stream when smuggling, in particular gold or anything else that has such a high value. So now that we've had crime school, what questions do we have?
If you mix your gold with some kind of other chemical, so it's like a powder, how do you get the gold back out easily?
If you mix your gold with hydrochloric acid and get gold chloride, what you have to do is then through a chemical process turn it back into gold. I don't know the exact chemical formula, but I assume it has something to do with a strong alkaline solution, and then the gold would precipitate out in the bottom of the flask. My chemistry years are about 20 years behind me.
I live in Toronto, and you're probably aware that a couple weeks back there was a gold bullion theft from the airport. I think $20 million worth. Where do you think that gold is going to end up, or how are they going to move it?
I love that robbery, by the way. It's something out of a Hollywood movie.
Pretty close.
Yeah. If I were them, and I'm not, but if I were them, I would very, very quickly remelt it to get rid of the hallmarks and the serial numbers. So now you make that step between attribution and the evidence, makes it one step harder. Where did you get all that gold? Now I would then take that gold and I would turn it into small items that are frequently used. I would go back to brass rod. It's so easy to make brass rod out of gold, especially if it's pure gold, because it's so malleable.
So
And
would you
then
to send it out to one of these free trade zones and move it from there?
oh yeah, there's a number of stories about Ugandan free trade zone and flights in a Russian bomber going from Isla Margarita directly to the refinery just off the airport runway in Entebbe. Free trade zones. So illegal but tolerated or legal. Free trade zones are very legal. It's essentially like an offshore financial center next to your airport. The free trade zone in Zurich has one of the largest art collections anywhere in the world. Why is that? Well, you can invest in art and have it held there at the offices of the free trade zone, in their warehouse, etc. And you can sell that to someone else. And who's going to know that you sold it? Second, the purchase or sale of art in Europe has a VAT. There's a tax on it. Plus a disclosure. Now it starts getting ugly.
In order for that art to be really valuable, though, doesn't it have to have some kind of provenance with it, which I would assume you're losing?
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. There has to be a substantial provenance from its creation or its attribution going forward. Whose hands has it been in? Where has it been, etc. There's a family, and I'm forgetting their name, it used to be in front of me, that more or less is a monopoly on the Picasso, Magdaleni, and Chagall's. And as the old man in an interview said, he said, during good times, we're a seller. During bad times, we're a discreet buyer.
But you don't lose the provenance by living in the free trade zone.
No, not at all. The provenance stays with the artwork. There's a wonderful group in London called the Art Due Diligence Group. These are some of the finest chemists, art historians, anywhere in the world that will help work and establish provenance or beat provenance. What really they've been having fun with recently is counterfeit certificates of provenance. Oh, speak to AML and how does it happen? Well, anti-money law, let's go back to what is money laundering. Money laundering is the movement of money tied to a crime, either before or after the movement of the money. A crime after the movement of the money might be terrorism, where you're donating or financing terrorism. The money moves, then the illegal act occurs. Before might be you lied about your investment opportunity, you've got the money in, and then you start moving it out into your name, into names of your parrots and dogs and all those good things. Now that again, there's a crime, a misrepresentation to investors, and there's the movement of money out of the fund for personal gain. How could gold work in that? Well, the gold helps anonymize the movement of that money. The key in money laundering and doing asset recovery is to follow that trail. If that trail turns into hard cash or into gold, it becomes much harder to find. One of the most successful ones, I love that. How about the story of the lady who smuggled gold in her vagina? Are you talking about the old Indian lady in the wheelchair? Yes, of course you are. I'll get back to that. One of the most successful ones is where a fellow decided that he would buy warehouse receipts, and he would buy warehouse receipts for grains. Have you ever, are any of you familiar with warehouse receipts? Amazing. I wish I had one here. It says Hallmark, but it actually says warehouse receipt. They're usually about this big, maybe a little bit bigger. And it says, Burke Files on this day deposited 1,750,000 bushels of wheat rather, at this grain elevator. That's it. I can sign the back of it and transfer it to someone else. When you start getting into warehouse receipts, either in a free trade zone or not in a free trade zone, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to find. 1 or 2 transactions and you're years behind the person that is moving the money. I particularly like the one right now where I'm chasing a gentleman who's been dead 6 years, but is still banking. Oh, as the story about the old lady who smuggled gold in her vagina. She was an old Indian woman, grandma, and she had arrived in India, and they had a history of travel with grandmama. And finally, the guards were getting a little upset that she wouldn't get out of her chair or stand up or anything else to be wanded. And they tried to wand her and it would go off, but they said, oh, that's just the metal in her hip. Well, finally, they grabbed her by both shoulders and made her stand up, and then the gold fell out. Everyone got real quiet after that. You would have to remember that story, wouldn't you, Judy?
Of course I would.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, you'll see gold smuggled in many different ways. More often than not, it's jewelry, some very heavy, very fine jewelry. Not very heavy, not very fine, but very heavy jewelry, because you're getting the weight of the gold. That's what you're trying to move. I've heard of gold shot, like buckshot, just putting a couple of Ziploc bags and stuffed underneath the seat of an airplane. You just need 5, 6 Ziploc bags, and you got $1 million underneath everyone's butt in the airplane. So just again, to summarize, when laundering the gold, what you're looking at smuggling the gold is you're trying to get it from point A to point B, and there's a reason you can't move it. There's a legal prohibition, there's taxes, there's some type of reason you can't move it. So now you have to move it from A to B and transform it in such a form that if you are caught, no one will know that it's gold, or move it in such a way that the likelihood of you getting caught is incredibly reduced, such as using drones. Oh yeah. The buying life insurance and getting a clean refund back. There's a lot of that goes on in real estate. It's a lot easier in real estate. I'll go over to, I'll bug Bob because he's got a nice beard. Never trust anyone with a beard. They're hiding something. Yeah, I know. My sister is a realtor in Rhode Island, and she said, I got a strange case. The guy's offering to look at these $1 million homes, and he's willing to put $30,000 down in an escrow. I said, okay. She goes, normally people don't put money in an escrow until they're waiting to buy. I said, okay. Ask him if he could double that to 70,000 and make sure that he's real. She goes, okay, I'll bite. Then ask for proof of it. She called me back. She said, he agreed to make it 70,000, was happy about that, and then faxed me proof of the money. It was to the Bank of Nagasaki was the proof. And I looked at it and I knew it was false, but I had to get the proof from the Bank of Nagasaki, and I sent a copy to the representative office in New York. And with typical Japanese understatement, file-san, this is not one of our statements. Why do you say that? One, our statements are not in English. Okay. He said, why did you suspect this statement? I said, I remember very well that the number nomenclature in Japan for 10 million would be 10 decimal point 000.000 comma, and the cents after the comma. It was the other way around. It was the American style. Yeah, I'm great on Jeopardy till it comes to a popular culture or sports question, and then I'm toast. But yeah, that's the same thing in doing life insurance, is ponying up a big chunk of money coming from a company, Crystal, we'll call it Crystal Resources of North Carolina. Then you decide you want to get a refund, and that check goes to Crystal Resources of Missouri.
Mm.
Makes it very difficult to trace. Chased one guy who had 8 or 9. It was 8 or 9 companies by the name of Crystal Management. And of course, they all managed a property building. And then when there was an insurance claim on one building, it went to a Crystal Management company that had nothing to do with that building, but he made the investors pony up for the repairs when he pocketed the refund. And you're talking there, okay, laundering with gold, buy gold with dirty cash, and then you're stuck with something you have to smuggle. Right. Good point. Don't be confused. Cash is bulky, and cash has numbers on it. And taking cash across a border can be difficult. However, with gold, it is easier to transform that gold into another state or form to get that value across the border. Think of it not as smuggling money, but rather smuggling value. You have digging in my collection here of currency. You know, you have 100 reals. This represents value. All right, but you can't move this 100 reals or all the other reals you have across the border. I was looking for my Zimbabwe dollars. You can only take out $300 every time you leave Zimbabwe.
Mm.
Even if you come in with 1,000 and it's your own money and you don't spend it, you can only take out that 300. So how do you convert that money into a value you can take out of that country? Gold is an example of converting that money into a value that you can then take out of that country. A gemstone would be an example. A collectible item would be another example. I don't know what a collectible item out of Zimbabwe would be. You know, I don't know, an animal trophy, tanzanite, some type of, oh, I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of as a gemstones, tanzanite, and then of course you go back to gold. Zimbabwe is a gold-rich country.
When you say $300, that's not 300 Zimbabwe dollars, is it?
No. No. Not even Zimbabwe people take Zimbabwe dollars. I have them somewhere. I know they're not in my drawer. It's probably in my currency collection. But of the 100 trillion Zimbabwe notes, they decided that they were having enough trouble getting enough currency that they would, where the hell is it? They print their own local money. And I have some Zimbabwe dollar, some $2 and $5 Zimbabwe notes. And they're supposed to be on par with US dollars, but they don't take them. They don't want them. It's one of the few places I found, this is where I got this too, is in Zimbabwe. And there was a general strike called for the day I was supposed to go to work. I said, so what happens? Mr. Files, there's nothing to do. When they say general strike, it's across the country. No cabs, no buses, no workers. Our generators are running because the electricity went off. Okay. So walked outside trying to figure out what to do, and my nose smelled barbecue. I have a very good nose for that. And I followed the nose. And a couple of doors down, a fellow who had a shop along the street was grilling grilling chicken and selling chicken, potatoes, and beer. Everything was in $2 denominations. I had a great lunch for $12, and all my change was in $2 bills. And I realized that half the $2 bills were counterfeit. So I thought, oh, I'm not going to get screwed here. This is ridiculous. And then I realized, okay, it is just $2. You're in another country. Shut up. So when my friend Dr. Probert came back, he said, what do you want to do? He said, let's go get some beers. I got some money to see if it's going to work. He goes, okay. Went back to the same place, used the same tubes. They were happy to take it. They respected the value.
How did you
But-
know they were counterfeit?
It's not hard.
Oh.
Yeah, I authored a white paper on identifying counterfeit currency. Also hired a guy who was arrested for counterfeiting currency. Worked with him for years. But 90% of all counterfeit money, you just close your eyes and feel.
Oh,
You'll know it right off the bat.
Okay.
Just have someone hand you a piece of blank sheet paper and a currency note. The feel is different right off the bat. Now they do work a little harder to work on that feel. Getting into my collection of stuff in my drawers. This is fun. Oh, look. Cleverly labeled. Counterfeit.
mhm.
Yeah, you can just feel these. That one was from Africa. You can just feel them. They're wrong. This one is black and white. And you can also use, I don't have one here at my desk, a UV light to test them. And if they're printed on any paper that has what's called a sizing in it, typically starch, it will glow very brightly. Yeah, this is my let's see, 1, 2, 3, my collection of $5 in counterfeit singles. The fun things you have. But yeah, it's just kind of in a wrap up, you take a look at what people are trying to do, and they're trying to capture value and move it. And in Western philosophy, Locke, Hume, Marx all realize that we have our values in our labor. And some hours of labor are worth more, some are less. A brain surgeon probably gets paid more than a guy that builds a rock wall. But now how do we come up with money as a way to balance a ledger? If I'm trading with Susan and I've got 5 goats and Susan says, hey, that's nice, but that's not enough for all this woodwork I've done. We need to balance that trade. That's where currency came in. She says, okay, I'll do this trade, but to balance this trade, I want a certificate from you for 10 hours of your labor. That's the beginning of currency. That's that certificate for your labors. Take that forward to one of the more interesting accidental experiments. Was in, I think, the early 70s. The Irish bank tellers decided that they were going to go on strike and bring the country to their knees. And the bank said, forget it. Okay, it's not going to bother us. So all of a sudden, there were no bank tellers. How do you deal in a cash society? These are before debit and credit cards. How do you deal in a cash-based society? Well, what happened is a lot of the grocery stores and the rest would collect the cash, and they would immediately sell that cash to others. in your local community, what would happen is you would have an IOU for so many pounds. And what happened is those IOUs all went to the central pub, the pub of the neighborhood, where those pubs actually acted as clearinghouses for those IOUs and how to net them out. And while the bank tellers union thought that they'd bring the country to the knees, it actually grew economically faster with the banks closed than with the banks open.
Mm.
Just amazed at how creative, instinctively creative us humans are. I find it amazing. More questions? Cool. Well, this has been a pleasure, folks.
Yeah, that
Happy
was a
Mother's Day.
Question, if you're allowed. I don't know
Hmm?
if it's too much off topic. Do you have an opinion on Bitcoin as a store of value or transferring value?
Oh, you've got a grump on this side.
Mm.
Bitcoin will work as long as other people think it works.
Mhm.
And that's the point behind it. If the faith is lost, the value disappears. Now, right now, what is the economic model for a cryptocurrency, any cryptocurrency? It's a problem looking for a solution. It's a solution, rather, looking for a problem. Do I need it here in the US? No. I've got a simple payment methods. I've got ACH transactions. I can wire money all over the world pretty inexpensively. I don't need it. And our currency is actually, quite frankly, very trustworthy. But what if you live in Argentina? Whoa, there's a big difference. You don't want your money in Argentinian pesos. You want your money in something else that is easily transferable. And so Argentinians look not only at Bitcoin, but other stable currencies. They also have their own agro token that they use for farmers, to wholesalers, to restaurants, to consumers. That's working quite well. And another thing a lot of them do is they buy bricks. They buy bricks because a brick will always be a brick. And that later in the year, you can sell a brick, or you can trade a brick, or you can use the bricks to build your home. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that in Kenya or Nigeria, they were using telephone minutes at one point.
Actually, yes, they were using telephone minutes all over the world as a medium of exchange. What offset the telephone minutes was something called M-Pesa, M-Pesa. It's Swahili for money. M-Pesa is a complete digital solution to transfer money. And you can do Kenyan shillings, euros, dollars. It's an incredible platform. I was there when we were buying gas in the middle of nowhere. They were looking for a gas shack, and they knew approximately where it is. The gas shacks in the middle of nowhere painted royal blue. They do stick out from the green. And then, of course, Mr. Files, you go outside and you hold up the gas can. Why me? You're the tallest one here. Okay, that makes sense. And what's your number? What's your number? Oh, okay. Great. Got payment. Thank you. There was cell service. We made payment. It's brilliant. And you can, in Kenya, you can pay your bills with it. You can pay your power bill. You can pay speeding tickets. You can send money to someone else's M-Pesa account. You can change currencies. It's a brilliant solution, much easier to use than most of the cryptocurrencies.
Well, one other idea with Bitcoin is that it's supposed to be stable because it's limited to 21 million. So some people consider it a bit like gold. I don't know how it's with you in the US. I think you also have some problems with inflation like we have here in Europe. So
yeah, we have
that's
politicians
one of the
who
ideas.
print too much money.
And then with Bitcoin, it's like, it's limited. And well, you're totally right. If there's no trust from people in Bitcoin, it will, lose its value. But the technical solution is pretty incredible, I think.
I think the technical solution is amazing. However, it only holds value as long as people believe it has value. And that's the key to any currency is, do you believe that the note that has 2 zeros on it is going to be worth 100 something tomorrow? And that you can use that note to buy yogurt or gas.
Yeah, same goes for gold, but gold has a
yeah.
1,000 years history. And
exactly.
yeah.
And you can even look at something such as a commodity-backed coin. I have a dear friend who helped found Alumina Coin. His coins are backed by aluminum.
Well, you always have the counterparty risk with that. So,
well, actually, you don't. If you're doing it correctly and you have a commodity backing, the commodity should be able to be found in a warehouse and audited.
Yeah, but if you have it, can you verify that? Probably not. If you are in, I don't know, Australia or something, and
actually
the depot is in.
Yeah, they
in
do
the
publish
US or
their
something.
audits online.
Yeah,
They publish
but
their
there's
audits.
the counterparty risk. You have to trust the auditing.
Correct. There comes a point in time when you have to draw a line in the amount of effort you do to build in the trust, because I know that audits aren't always what they're cracked up to be.
Yeah, and
I mean, if audits were what they're cracked up to be, my financial investigative practice wouldn't be doing real well.
Yeah, well, the thing with Bitcoin is that you can look it up in the ledger that is accessible to everybody, but the thing with adoption is the key question that's going to determine if it's going to be something in the future.
And that's true of any currency.
Since
It's true of any currency.
Since the U.S. currency is no longer backed by gold and we have a terrific debt, what makes us think it's worth anything?
We just happen to be the least best solution out there. The least worst solution out there. What other currencies would you hold?
Somebody who has less debt, maybe.
Debt per GDP. I'm going to use that as the marker. Well, let's see. China has more debt to GDP than almost any developed nation. Europe has more debt to GDP than we do. Not by much, but by a little. So actually, probably the best and most robust currency out there is the Swiss franc. But how many people take the Swiss franc? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key parts that
I would, but that's me.
Use it,
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the problems with cryptocurrency is use. It's not as easy to use for most people.
True, but maybe it will become more easy to use in the future. It has gone some steps forward in the last 10 years, I think.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, I'm a grump. They do have a purpose, and I look at a purpose-driven role for any solution. And for someone in the United States, cryptocurrency is a solution looking for a problem. But in places like Argentina, Turkey, even Ukraine, the risk behind the digital currency is less than the risk in holding their own local physical currency. So it makes sense.
The country of El Salvador adopted it as legal currency.
Yes. Yes. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and there's a state in Switzerland where you can pay your taxes with Bitcoin.
And what happens is the moment they receive the Bitcoin, they convert it into francs.
Most probably.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I am as an independent business person, I am happy to take payment in most any currency. One of the great bills ever settled was settled in Toronto, where I was paid in Canadian dollars, US dollars, British pounds, and euros. That basically made up the 5,000.
Yeah, you even made it happen to use counterfeit money to, you took it and you even were able to spend it again, as we learned today.
That's
So
right.
that's
That was in
pretty
that
crazy
was
story.
that was in Harare. But right, to answer the question, it has to do with faith and trust. And at this point in time, digital currencies have faith in them that is only above the fact that they have no faith in their local currency. I didn't say that correctly. Their faith in the digital currency is greater than their faith in the local currency. So therefore, it makes a sense to use it. If something happens to the US and our currency falls out of favor, what is likely to happen? What would be adopted as a new single currency for international transactions? I don't think there would be one. I think we'd go back to the between World War I and World War II, where transactions were settled in many different currencies, the pound or the franc or the lira, the dollar, the yen. And what has happened is after World War II, and it was quite as a result of World War II and Bretton Woods, that the US dollar became the international currency. And like it or not, you can say, oh, great, we're the international currency. But then again, our currency ends up kind of overvalued. And as a currency that's slightly overvalued, that means our exports are more expensive than other people's exports on average. So there's a handicap that comes with it.
Thanks. I mean, this was incredibly interesting. And
Thanks. I had
of
fun.
course, you have such a wealth of fascinating stories. I'm glad we got to talk about everything from how they do it in Africa to modern Bitcoin. It's really a fascinating talk.
It's good fun. I love the questions too. I really
Yeah,
do.
thank you everybody for spending time with us today.
All right.
It was really a great turnout.
I'm going
Yeah.
to go cook. It's
All
Mother's
right.
Day. Watch your heart,
Yeah.
guys.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Thank you, Burke. Take care. All right.